So it was a beautiful spring day, May 1972. My mother told us, we're going on a picnic. Now, this may sound like a very normal thing for a mother to tell her children, but my family and I, we weren't picnic people. So my brother, sister, and I, we were very suspicious. We lived in a very middle-class suburban area, Columbia, Maryland, about 45 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. We drove a Brady Bunch-style station wagon, you know, the green ones with the wood paneling on the side. But we never really fit in to middle-class lifestyle. My parents were political activists, and we would regularly hold meetings at our house where we had Black civil rights leaders from Washington and Baltimore come to our house dressed in their very colorful yellow, orange, and blue dashikis. There are photos of my sister and I splashing in the reflecting pools of Washington, D.C. during anti-Vietnam War protests as we were children. And my mother was convinced that not one but two of our neighbors, the Murphys across the street and the Joneses next door, were actually FBI agents planted there to spy on us. It's very possible that was true. So when my mom said we're going on a picnic to Washington, D.C., my brother, sister, and I knew something was up. But my brother was 15, my sister was 10, I was 7, so what could we do? We all piled into the station wagon, my parents in the front, my brother and sister in the middle, and me sitting cross-legged in the back luggage area. It was before parents knew about seatbelts could save their children's lives. So we headed off to Washington, D.C. And as we get closer, we cross the border from Maryland into Washington, and we make a left-hand turn onto 16th Street. Now, some of you may know that 16th Street heads straight towards the White House. And about a mile and a half before you get to the White House, there's a beautiful park called Meridian Park, which is also known as Malcolm X Park. And in the 1970s, the neighborhood around Malcolm X Park was largely a Black working-class neighborhood. So as my father pulls up to the curb in front of Malcolm X Park and we start getting out of the car, we quickly notice that there are hundreds and hundreds of the Black residents of the neighborhood all streaming into Malcolm X Park with us. It turns out it is African Liberation Day. The papers the next day would call it the largest all-Black political rally ever to take place in Washington, D.C. I guess that reporter somehow missed my family and I in the middle of that crowd. The New York Times would said it was 10,000 people had gathered in Malcolm X Park to speak out against white imperialism and speak up for repressed Black people around the world. This is what my mother called a family picnic. So we walk with the crowd into Malcolm X Park. We find a small plot of grass to put our blanket out, and we sit down. Now, one of my mom's best friends was supposed to be meeting us there, a man named Balagoon Alubala. Now, Alubala was actually born with the name of Benjamin Wilson, but when he was 17 years old, he attended a civil rights rally in Alabama and was beaten unconscious by white police officers. And so he decided after that to reject the name given his ancestors by their white slave owners, and he took on the Swahili name of Balagoon Alubala, which means warlord, savior of the people. So a couple minutes after we spread our blanket out on the grass, Alubala walks up to us. My mom looks up at him, astonished. "How did you ever find us in this massive crowd?" Alubala looked at her and just burst out laughing and said, "Are you kidding me?" My mother sincerely did not get the joke, and my father had explained it to her later. So as we sit down on the blanket eating our sandwiches, the speeches start on a platform about 100 feet in front of us. And Angela Davis, the Black Panther leader, speaking, Leroy Jones, the civil rights poet, and various members of the Black Congressional Caucus are speaking. As the speakers wrap up, the 10,000 Black political activists and my family and me all rise up, and we start heading towards 16th Street for the mile-and-a-half march towards the White House. Now, unlike everybody else in the crowd, we had forgotten to bring our posters and our banners, apparently, and they were holding posters saying Black Power, Stop Apartheid Now, U.S. Divest from South Africa. But we didn't have any of those signs. But my parents were very enthusiastically chanting along with the rest of the crowd, "Stop apartheid now," or "No justice, no peace, no justice, no peace." Now, my brother, sister, and I were trying as much as we could to fit in. And so we, under our breaths, quietly are also saying, no justice, no peace, no justice, no peace. But at one point, the crowd starts with a new chant. We are an African people. We are an African people. So my brother looks at my sister and I and says very meekly, I don't think we can say that. My sister and I looked up at him and just shrugged, not knowing what to do. So we look at my parents 3 feet ahead of us for guidance. And sure enough, my blonde-haired, blue-eyed mother and my father of German-Irish descent are chanting loudly, we are an African people. We are an African people. Now today, if you ask my brother about this, he has a lot of resentment. He says our parents never taught us to fit into middle-class society. He says he always felt awkward and never felt like he fit in either with his black friends or his white friends. I, on the other hand, feel like I learned a lot from that day. First, never be ashamed of who you are. Second, always speak up for what you believe in. And thirdly, while my brother says that he just wanted to die of embarrassment on that day, for me, it taught me whenever you find yourself in a situation where you want to just die of embarrassment, always remember, what doesn't kill you makes a great story. Thank you.